Welcome to The Unedited Woman, where you'll hear candid conversations to improve your everyday life. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another solo episode of The Unedited Woman. My name is Ash Butterss. I'm the Makeover Mentor, and I'm here on a mission to help guide you through a physical, emotional, and spiritual makeover. So today I am going to be sharing with you all the transformative experience that I just went through attending the Breathwork facilitator training that I went to in the snowy mountains in New South Wales a couple of weeks ago. So it's taken me a minute to land from this experience. It was a 4-day immersive, intensive training. There was a lot of learning, a lot of experimenting, a lot of facilitating, and I came home from attending that weekend just almost like being like, whoa, okay, time to integrate, time to allow my nervous system to absorb everything that has just been received and to actually really process the experience because it was huge. And, you know, it's quite funny because I was probably one of the last people to, I thought, ever go down this path of breath work. You know, going into recovery and then starting my transformation journey, something that I felt really called to was meditation and yoga. But breath work was something that I just thought was like, yeah, this is a phase. You know, people are just doing ice baths and doing breath work and Wim Hof and all that kind of stuff. Like it's a phase, it'll blow over. So I was a bit of a skeptic. And I even read that book by James Nestor. I think it's Breathe or Breath. And I remember at the time everyone was going crazy for this book, saying how incredible it was. And I just kind of didn't really get it. And that was until I was actually properly introduced to breakthrough breathwork. So for me, my first introduction with this was a bit over a year ago, and I'll share with you a little later in the episode how that came to be. But it was from that very first experience that I was like, wow, there is something so incredible, so powerful with breathwork. I need to know more. And as with everything that has changed my life, I then become so hungry to share it with others because I am on a mission to serve and I want to be able to help people create the same life transformation that I've experienced. And it would be remiss of me to talk about my transformation journey and to not talk about breath work. So this is what today's episode is all about. And if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know if this is really relevant for me. I breathe every day. I think my breathing is fine. That was me too, firstly. And secondly, I even going to this training was blown away by how little I really understood. So I was first introduced to your pranayama breathwork practices when I did my yoga teacher training. But that is just like one little sliver of the breathwork pie. Like there is so much to know about breathwork. There's even like breath retraining, which was really interesting. That was something that I was initiated into and I learned how to facilitate during my time away. And then, of course, the breakthrough breathwork, which is really where my heart is drawn to because I just am so blown away by the incredible shifts that people can experience in real time. Like people can release decades of trauma that they've been holding on to within their bodies unconsciously in the space of an hour, if facilitated in a safe space and done in a loving way. It just blew my mind watching all of the incredible people around me move through these processes as well. And then also being able to facilitate these journeys, which was just such a gift. And I'm just so excited to take you through what actually happened. So let's dive into this episode. So like I said, if you're sitting here listening thinking, breathwork isn't that really that relevant for me, I breathe every day, it's fine. Something that the founder of Breathless, Johannes Egbert, who was taking the instructor training, shared with us was that he believes about 90 to 95% of adults in today's society breathe incorrectly. They have some sort of disruption to their breath, which is absolutely mind-blowing, especially when you understand just how much our overall health and wellness and quality of life is linked to our breath. So I was certainly someone that didn't really think that I had much trouble with my breath. I thought, I breathe pretty easy. I breathe through my nose. Like even that simple fact that breathing through your nose is how we're meant to breathe. I think a lot of people can breathe through their mouths, which is incorrect. I thought to myself, I nostril breathe. I'm okay. No, there is so much that you can do. Like anything, like going to the gym for your muscles, training your breath is going to impact and improve your overall quality of life. But before we dive into the science of breath work and how it actually works, which I'm going to share with you because it's just fascinating, I want to tell you the story of how I was actually called to breath work in the first place. So as many of you know, I started my own transformation journey at the beginning of 2020 when I decided to go to rehab and get sober. And throughout that journey, I started doing quite intensive therapy, and it was talk therapy. I was meeting with my therapist on a really regular basis, and I was talking about all of the things that had happened that I could remember. And we would also do inner child work and somatic healing, but we never ever touched on the breath. Anyhow, it was around the middle of last year when I was flying to Queensland to go on a work trip. And I got off the plane, landed on the Gold Coast, got off the plane. As I was walking to the baggage carousel, I looked up and there was one of those advertising billboards, which is digital. So like the image changes. And as the image was changing over, I saw an image of an ex-boyfriend of mine pop up on the screen. And now this is someone who I haven't spoken to in a long time. Things weren't really left that great. And I hadn't done the healing around it. I thought I had because logically I'd spoken to my therapist about it. I had processed it cognitively, like I'd intellectually processed it. And I'd moved on, so I just didn't think that there was really anything still there. But what happened in that moment, it was like a split second. My body went into complete panic and I couldn't think rationally. In that moment, I was just so terrified that I was going to bump into this person. Now, the Gold Coast is a big place. Why I assumed that I was going to see him in the 24 hours that I was going to be up there was really irrational, but that's what happened. My brain, my cognitive functioning completely switched off and I went into fight or flight. I went into that sympathetic nervous system reaction and I was like, I got to get out of here. And it felt like quite a traumatic experience. Luckily, the person I was meeting up with that day was able to really understand what I was going through. And we went down to the beach and I got my feet in the sand and took some nice deep breaths and helped myself calm down and free myself from that initial panic attack. But what really resonated with me in that moment was there was work to do. I realized in that moment that my body was still holding on to things that I thought I had let go of. And I know I always reference this book, but I'm going to bang on about it again. And if you haven't read it, please go read it. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. Like he talks all about this, that we have issues in our tissues that are stored there. And a lot of the time, our bodies don't process them because it doesn't feel safe to do so. So that can be why you have amnesia around a particular event, especially acute traumatic events in childhood. The brain will often just completely erase the memory to keep you protected, but the body still holds the trauma. And I believe this is what was happening to me. This person who has been in my life for a really, really long time, I still hadn't fully let go and healed. And it was in that moment that I decided I was not going to be a victim to this, that I wanted to be free from that panic, that terror, that fear. And I wanted to be free from holding on to this stuff. Like, I really don't want to have anyone in my life that I'm holding resentment towards or anger, because at the end of the day, like that's hurting me. It's hurting the way I show up in the world. And I want to be free from that. So I made the decision to go down the path of breathwork without really knowing much about it at all. It's funny how things happen, but I'd been at a Spotify event. It was like a podcasting event a few weeks earlier, and I'd met these two sisters, and we just got to talking and we really hit it off, and we exchanged Instagrams, and it was actually on one of the sisters' Instagram feeds that I had seen her post a story about going to a breakthrough breathwork session. And I had remembered that. And so when I got home back to Melbourne, I looked it up and I found this girl, Amy Marie, who was based in Melbourne. Perfect. And I decided to book in a one-on-one session with her. And so, like I said, driving over to her house, I had limited expectation of what the experience was actually going to entail, but I was really open to it. And I was really honest with her about what had happened in Queensland the week earlier and what I was looking to release. And she explained to me at the beginning of the session that every single breathwork session is different from the last. Or if it's your first one, you never really know what's going to come up. My experience has been that my body processes what it needs to process at the right time. Like, the body is way wiser than I am. And so, as much as you can go into a session with an intention of, I want to work on X, like I want to work on an X partner, for instance, you may actually end up processing something else in that instance. But just trusting that the body is so wise and the body will take you where you need to go at the right time. So to this day, I still don't know exactly what I processed on the floor that day. But what I can tell you is it was huge. So we did a 90-minute session. I was probably breathing for around 45, 50 minutes of that session. And oh my goodness, I experienced all of the things. I had pins and needles and tingling all throughout my body. I was shaking, which I believe is the trauma actually releasing through the body. Like, you've got to move it, you've got to feel it to heal it. And so I always say to people, welcome the shakes, welcome the sensations. They're not scary, they're not bad. It means that you're actually processing this stuff. I was also crying, and the tears were coming from such a deep place. Like I said, I don't consciously know exactly what I was processing in that moment, but I could feel it coming up and out of me. At one point, I even let out this primal scream, and it felt like years of suppression, years of pain that I had not processed up until that moment. And coming out of the session, I felt lighter. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I actually looked different. It's funny because I recorded a video afterwards and I shared it on my stories on Instagram, and people were commenting. They're like, your face looks different. It's hard to explain, but it was like it was lighter. It was like my eyes were brighter. And I just felt this sense of freedom. That's the best way to describe it. And so obviously I was like, I need to know more about this. I need to do this more often. And that's really what kicked off my journey. So I started off very much as the student, and then over time I became the teacher, because like I said, I love to share the practices and the modalities that have changed my life with other people. But I wanted to go even deeper. And that's why I decided to go and do this instructor training in the snowy mountains. And I was tossing up between, there's so many different practitioner trainings out there, but, I always listen out for what the universe is trying to communicate to me. And I had actually had four different people talk to me about Breathless. And so the first person was Amy Marie. That's where she went. And then I met and did breathwork with another person who I actually knew when growing up with back in Melbourne. She's in Noosa and she mentioned Breathless. And then I had two different clients, both talk about Breathless. And I was like, okay, I think the universe is telling me to look into this. And so that's what I did. So they host their instructor training in Crackenback, New South Wales. I know, hilarious name. I giggled to myself, but it's in the Snowy Mountains, which is about a 7-hour drive with no stops from where I live in Melbourne. So that's what I decided to do. I was going to throw myself all in. I always want to make sure that I have as much knowledge and as much experience and as much expertise as possible when I'm working with clients. And so this felt like the perfect next step. So in the lead up, there was about 30 hours of study and quizzes and exam assessments that needed to be completed. So I was doing all of that online. And then the time finally came to go on the immersion experience. And so it was Friday morning. I woke up at 4 a.m. and I basically got myself in the car and started driving to the Snowy Mountains. And oh my goodness, I tell you what, that was probably one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life. It did not stop raining, like proper heavy rain, from the minute I got in the car until the minute I arrived. And I'm telling you, being on the highway next to those massive trucks when it's pitch black and pouring with rain is so terrifying. I was driving so slow, but then I had to speed up to overtake trucks at certain points because it was actually worse being behind them because of the back spray of their wheels. Anyway, I guess in a way I was grateful because it meant that I was like super, super focused on what I was doing. Like I wasn't taking phone calls. I was basically just listening to podcasts and like eyes on the road, both hands on the wheel, holding on tightly and just staying super, super focused. I actually think my car like waterboarded a couple of times. Like, when it kind of lifts up off the air, that was terrifying. But we made it in one piece. And I arrived in Crackenback at about 12:30 p.m., ready to start at 1 o'clock. And you may be surprised to hear that I actually don't love big groups and like that initial meeting new people. Even though I come across as really extroverted and really confident, I still get, I don't know if it's nervous or just like a little bit like, I find it a bit exhausting, if I'm being perfectly honest. And so I was preparing myself mentally for that. But in terms of what was to come from the actual weekend and the training, I didn't really have a lot of expectations. Again, like in my initial experience with breathwork, I went in there kind of just going like, let's learn, let's see where I get taken with this. And so I'm happy to report that my expectations, which were low at the time, but to be fair, they were blown out of the water with this experience. Like first and foremost, when you go on a retreat like this or a training like this, it attracts like-minded people. And that was something that was really beautiful. I think there was about 20 of us all together and a good healthy mix between men and women. But everyone was there because they wanted to grow. And everyone was there because they wanted to help others, which I thought was really, really beautiful. So it definitely attracted those like-minded souls. And there was almost an instant connection. We started breathwork training, like doing a breathwork practice from pretty much the minute we got there. we were in this space which was so beautiful. It had like all of these amazing instruments and all of the mats laid out, and Palo Santo was burning, and the space was beautiful. And Johannes was there with his team of facilitators, and we all got onto our mats and we pretty much did a breakthrough breath work straight off the bat. And I had a really profound experience in that session. I was shaking, I was crying. At one point, they put a pillow over my face so I could scream. And I was not expecting that to happen right off the bat. Now, that's not to say that that breathwork practice was any better or worse than anyone else's. That's just what I needed to process at that moment. And I always love when I have those big releases, because I then realize I'm free from that. Like, that stuff isn't stuck inside my body anymore. So then we went into a bit of training, we went into a bit of theory, and then we actually did another breath work practice. But the second one that afternoon was a holotropic breath work. And holotropic breath work is where you breathe in and out of your mouth. I'll tell you a little bit more about the science behind it later. But that was amazing as well. And that one, I didn't have as much of a release, but I still felt so, so good after it. So basically, we were there in the shed from 1 p.m. till about 5:30. And then we went over to the chalet where we were staying. And we pretty much had, actually, I think we had about an hour just to like unpack and get settled. And then it was dinner. And then we had another like discussion group. And then it was straight to bed. The next day, we met at 7 o'clock in the morning. And we went till 9 o'clock at night with a 15-minute break. It was so intense. To describe it as rigorous would probably be an understatement. And think about it as well. It's not just the physical breath work, but also like the emotional releasing. But it was so, so powerful. We were learning things like breath retraining, which is from a guy called Butterss. And this is really powerful for people who perhaps are dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety, if they've had some troubles with their health. It's fantastic for people who suffer from asthma. And it's this breath retraining protocol that you can take people through to significantly improve the quality of their breath. And you do this thing called a baseline score, which is amazing because it actually measures the level of CO2. And you can start to increase this and actually strengthen, like you do your muscles when you go to the gym. You actually strengthen your breath and your capacity, which then has all of these overflowing health benefits, which I just thought was incredible. So I really enjoyed that part of the training, and I didn't even realize that that was going to be included. Like, I literally thought I was just going there to learn how to facilitate breakthrough breath work. But there was so much more to it. What else did we do on the Saturday? Oh my goodness. So we actually learned how to write sequences. So it was actually really similar to when you're writing a yoga sequence. Like if you're writing a class and you want to sort of build it up to a peak flow and then bring it back down again. We were learning all about the nervous system and how to guide someone through that process. Then we were actually practicing, so implementing, we were facilitating basically straight off the bat. This is what I loved about it as well. It was very immersive. It wasn't just sitting around and talking about these concepts. Like, we were really getting hands-on and actually guiding people through the process straight off the bat. But like I said, I really want to share with you some of the science behind breathwork, because it's such a transformative practice, but there is actually so much science that underpins this that really, I believe there's a wave, there's a movement coming where soon enough we'll be talking about breathwork the same way we're now talking about mindfulness and meditation. So let me share with you some of what actually happens in the body with the brain during these breathwork processes. So firstly, there's the nervous system, right? Now, you've heard me talk about this before. I work a lot with my clients around nervous system regulation, but obviously when we're stressed, we have that spike of cortisol and our body goes into fight or flight, which is your sympathetic nervous system. And what this does is it increases your heart rate, it increases your blood pressure, and it puts you on high alert. Now, there are many people who are in a constant state of fight or flight, which over time has some really detrimental impacts on your health. However, when you practice controlled breathing, especially your deep belly breathing or your diaphragmatic breathing, you actually switch on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is known as your rest and digest mode. In a perfect world, we want to be spending the majority of our day in our parasympathetic nervous system because it's this beautiful counterbalance to the stress, and it helps us to slow down and settle. It's almost like hitting a reset button for your nervous system. So a big part of this has to do with the vagus nerve, which is this large nerve that runs from the back of the brain all the way down into the gut. And it's a key player in the relaxation response, what helps you to feel calm and regulated within your body. And certain types of breathing can actually stimulate this nerve, which is what brings down your heart rate and has this grounding effect. In fact, Johannes was saying that having a healthy vagus nerve is better than any amount of money in the world, because if you have all the amount of money in the world, but you don't have a regulated nervous system and a healthy vagus nerve, you actually can't enjoy all of the things because you're dysregulated the whole time. Now, here's the really cool part. It also improves something called heart rate variability, which is basically like a sign of our resilience to stress. So whereas your heart rate you want low, your heart rate variability you actually want high when you're tracking this. And you can do this like using the Oura Ring like I've got on here. The Whoop does it. There's lots of different devices now that will measure your heart rate variability. But having a high heart rate variability shows that you've got a healthy nervous system. And when you practice breathwork regularly, this number increases. Along with, of course, eating healthy and making sure that you get regular exercise. But the body and your heart love breathwork. So then there's the brain. Now, breathwork has a profound impact here too. When we're stressed, our brain is flooded with cortisol, like we spoke about before. And this is known as the stress hormone. But breathwork actually lowers cortisol levels, which means that you'll feel calmer and clearer afterward. So even though you may not have a huge emotional release, you're still going to feel better. In fact, on the final day, we were partnered up with a pair, and I was actually working with a client of mine. She was there with me, and she was really, really tired before I guided her through the breath flow. And afterwards, even though she didn't have any emotional release, she wasn't crying, she wasn't shaking, she was full of energy, and she hadn't had a coffee. She had just regulated her breath and her nervous system, which gave her all of this amazing energy. And over time, regular breath work can actually increase neuroplasticity, which is, as you guys know, we've spoken about this before as well, the brain's ability to create new neural pathways. And this is why breathwork is so effective for people who are working through trauma or are on some sort of transformation journey. This is why it's so important for me when I'm working with clients to be going through this, because if we're going to get rid of those negative thought patterns and those limiting core beliefs, we need to be able to rewire the neural pathways, and breathwork allows us to do this. So when you practice breathwork consistently, you're literally rewiring the way that you respond to life. Partnered with meditation, oh my goodness, you are unstoppable. I also want to tell you about how breathwork works in terms of oxygenation within the body. I remember learning in the training how there's certain techniques that can actually increase the amount of oxygen in our bloodstream, which then goes into our cells and improves our energy and our focus. So some techniques, especially ones like where you're like holding the breath, so you might exhale and then hold before you take an inhale. What this does is it temporarily creates a kind of low oxygen state that, funnily enough, primes the body to absorb more oxygen, and that helps you to breathe more effectively and more normally overall. And that's why some people come out of these breathwork sessions feeling like really refreshed and sometimes almost like a little euphoric, which I'll talk to you about in a second because this is one of my favorite parts about breathwork. Now, like I said, the rewiring of the neural pathways is really profound, but what's even deeper is the significant impact that breathwork can have on releasing trauma. So when you practice certain breathwork techniques, you start to access the limbic system, which is actually the brain's emotional center. So we have the prefrontal cortex, which kind of wraps itself around the limbic system. And this was the last part of the brain to develop. So when you go into breath work, the last part to develop is the first part to fall away. And when the prefrontal cortex falls away, you are able to access the limbic system, which stores these emotions that have not been processed. So breath work actually allows you to open up these deeper layers and to allow those old emotions to surface. And because we're doing it through the body rather than just talking about it, it feels like a safe way to process things. It's almost like we trick the body into letting go of this stuff unconsciously. And something else that I had no idea about was the incredible connection between breathwork and your ability to focus. So there's actually been studies that have shown that when you practice breathwork regularly, you can increase your gamma and alpha brainwaves, which are associated with things like your concentration and your focus. So if you're someone who struggles with feeling scattered, if you have ADHD symptoms, then breathwork can actually help to strengthen that mental muscle and create a calmer outlook. So again, like it's just so multifaceted in the benefits that it has to offer. I don't know why anyone would not try it. Okay, and let me share with you one more. And this is probably my favorite one. But what I love about breathwork is the effect that you can create through conscious hyperventilation. Now, basically, that's just a fancy way of saying that we're breathing at a rapid rate in and out of the mouth. So it's also referred to as holotropic or rebirthing breathwork. And what it does is it actually lowers the carbon dioxide in your blood, which creates a mild alkaline state. Now, this sounds intense, but this altered state is actually really gentle. And it creates this sense of euphoria that you may have heard people talk about before. So often people might have visions or hear things that they've never had before in the process of doing this breath work. And basically what's happening is we're essentially letting the body experience a tiny bit of oxygen deprivation, which makes it rebound afterward, pushing fresh oxygen and leaving us feeling way more energized and alive. So, I love this phrase, but basically it says that breathwork is like getting high on your own supply, which is why I believe so many recovering alcoholics and addicts love it, because it's like a safe way to get high, essentially. Like you can't really overdo it. I mean, you can overdo everything, so don't take me on that, but it's such a cool way to be able to create those states of euphoria in a safe way. So what I came to realize is that breathwork is doing incredible things on so many levels. It's calming the nervous system, it's rewiring your brain, it can heal old wounds, and it can even improve focus and clarity. So if I haven't convinced you, then my goodness, I don't know what will. But in all seriousness, I don't need to convince you. This is something that if I've hit a nerve today and you're like, wow, I feel like I could benefit from this, then please do yourself a favor and just try it out. Go in and just like what's the worst thing that can happen? is really what I want to say here. I think that everybody can benefit from trying this experience. So I think it goes without saying that I am clearly obsessed with breathwork, and I am going to continue doing this as a personal practice because I want to continue to grow and evolve, and I don't think that we ever really stop doing that. But when I came back from the snowy mountains, I drove back on the Monday night. The first thing I did on the Tuesday morning was I sat down in my office and I came up with a way that I could offer this to more people. And so what I've actually done now, I'm super excited to share with you, is I have created openings. They're happening a couple of days a week in my calendar where you can actually book in with me to do a breathwork session. Whether you want to do breathwork retraining or breakthrough breathwork, we can talk about in more detail. But this is something that I'm just so yearning to offer, not just my clients, but the community at large, because I just can see, and I've had personal experience as to the deep transformation and healing that is on offer through this incredible practice. So if you want to book in, then you can go either one of two ways. You can go through my Instagram at @Butterss. There's a link in my bio which has a booking link that you can go straight through, or you can send me an email, hello@ashbutters.com. It's just my name. Remember, there's 2 S's on the end. And you can speak to me there and I can let you know. We can have a little chat and maybe work out if it's the right option for you, whether or not it's appropriate for you. You may have some questions, which is totally understandable if you've never tried anything like this. But all I want to say is if you're somebody who has been sitting on the fence about this, just give it a go. Because honestly, it has been probably one of the most transformative things that I've done in my journey to date. So that's for people living in Melbourne because these sessions are in person. There are ways that you can work with me online, and if you want to know more about that, just send me an email. But I'm super excited to start delivering these sessions in person here in Melbourne. Oh, also, if you're in Melbourne, there is an amazing place called Breath House where you can go and do group breath work. So I'm a one-on-one girly. I really like the deep connection that happens in the safety of a one-on-one space. But Breath House, there's 3 locations in Melbourne now, is an amazing space that you can go to if you want to dip your toe into the breathwork arena, and that's in more of a group space. So I'll link all of that info below. I'll actually link the booking link to the one-on-one sessions in the show notes below as well, so you don't have to go through my Instagram because that's just extra work for you. So I'll make that nice and easy for you. And in the meantime, if you've got any questions, you can always just hit me up on Instagram in the DMs. I'm always there and happy to chat. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for this week's episode. I hope you found it interesting. I am still blown away by everything that I learned in such a short space of time. And I cannot wait to see some of you in my studio space soon so that we can connect on a deeper level. As always, if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by going and hitting that follow button if you haven't done already. And if you would like to leave a 5-star review, I would be so super grateful. Thank you again for being here. I adore you, and I will see you next week.